What is up? We are on the next section of Matthew. We're going to be looking at Matthew 13, 10 to 17. This is our next section that we see Jesus. He's been telling stories in parables. Okay, now this is interesting. And one of the things you should have noticed yesterday is, well, why is Jesus talking this way? Because it's slightly confusing to the people that are listening, right? The disciples are even confused and they're having to ask Jesus, what does this mean? And so Jesus explains. He comes here and he explains. And what he's doing here is oh my gosh, my phone messed up. Here we go. Jesus is speaking in parables to fulfill more promises. He's fulfilling more promises, and we see that in our next section. So look with me at Matthew 13, verses 10. Because remember, we skipped this section. We're going to come back. We came back to it. So chapter 13, verse 10. And we're going to look through this section to verse 17, okay? And what the first thing we see is that Jesus is fulfilling more promises in the way he is speaking. He's fulfilling more promises because he is the Messiah who is promised in so many ways in the Old Testament, and he's coming into this world not based on false promises, but on real historical promises that were made to the people of Israel, and he's fulfilling them all. Right? So that's the first thing we see. Is again, he's just fulfilling more promises. And when I keep bringing this up, it should cause you to worship and love reading the scriptures, because you want to see, how does Jesus do this? And we go to the Old Testament and we see how beautiful it is because we see it in a lens of the New Testament. The second thing we see is that Jesus is speaking because the truths of the king. He's speaking this way because the truths of the kingdom are meant for the church. It's for the church at the end of the day. And he says this to the disciples, right, who would then go plant the seeds of the church and continue to spread the kingdom of Christ in this world. And so that's what we see. We see the truths of the kingdom are meant for the church. And that's why he's speaking in parables. Is he's giving these truths out to the people, but he's giving them out in a way that is calling only believers to himself in a lot of ways. And here's the last thing we see, is that the only way, and you see it in what he's saying, right? He says, and righteous people long to see what they see, and they did not see it, and hear what you hear, and did not hear it. And how do we hear? How do we see? How do we understand what Jesus is saying? Well, it's by the Spirit. We saw this yesterday, right? It's by the Spirit moving and opening our eyes, and it is by God saving us and helping us to see his truths in his scriptures. And that's why we read the Bible, and that's why go read the Bible, go read this section, do the ransom method on your own, and we'll catch you tomorrow every day, 10 a.m. We'll see you then.